This week, we've got questions on the lost generation, royal titles, and has there ever been a crisis of faith similar to the one we see today? Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu, now being broadcast and podcast on the Crusade Channel. Talk radio the way it should be at crusadechannel.com. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with an emotionally unavailable Charles Coulombe.
Emotionally unavailable?
Yes.
You mean just sort of having erected a total barrier between myself and anyone in the world who needs me?
That's correct, yes.
So, like if my nephews and nieces came to me, Uncle Charles, I've got a real problem, I'd be, so?
Yeah.
It's not my problem. Deal. So you're saying I'm emotionally unavailable?
Yeah, that was a perfect example right there.
I would never do that to any of my nephews or nieces or anybody else. You know, you are so high and mighty. What do you have an equity officer? Huh? Do you have sensitivity
What?
readers? Yes. Do you have an equity officer to deal with questions of inclusion, diversity, belonging in the everyday functioning of Tumblr House? Do you have sensitivity readers to look through the material you sell and make sure that none of it triggers anyone?
Equity officers? We kind of have equity officers, but I don't know if it's in the sense that you mean. Our equity officers go to the local shops in Arcadia and make sure we get some of the equity.
No, those are called enforcers. That's different. No.
Okay,
Those are carryovers.
I'm a little confused.
No. Those are carryovers from when your great uncle was still running the opera or the outfit, the company. Okay. No, all right. An equity officer is like a political commissar.
Political commissar, like
Well, yeah.
Soviet Russia.
Soviet Russia or a political officer, they called them in Nazi Germany. This is a person who's there to make sure that everything functions always with the party's views in mind. And see, you have them both in government and private enterprise to show that none are beyond range of the party.
Why you keep saying the party? We're a two-party system, Charles.
Sure. And the what? Now I am emotionally unavailable. The second, of course, the sensitivity readers. These were called censors in normal places, and they made sure that thought crime was kept out of the reading material of the plebes, the proles.
Very 1984. What is it? Yeah, I mean that's when you're changing. Wasn't that the main character's job? Is to sort of change headlines and put stuff down the memory hole and.
Yeah, he was a fact checker.
Fact checker. That's good.
He would check facts. He'd make sure that facts didn't stay there anymore. It's like check in chess or checkmate. You know, that's how he checked facts. He stopped facts. I mean, we have the wonderful notion today of the hate fact, which is something that's true but has no business being true according to the party.
I feel like we're on the last legs of this thing.
Of what? I feel like there's some downward spiral of our society that everyone is going down. Is that what you're feeling?
In a word, yes.
Okay, let me explain why you're wrong. It's not that society is going downhill and that all of our cherished beliefs, values, and traditions are being destroyed by a moronic ruling class who couldn't find their way out of an elevator. No. What it is that we are in the pupal stage.
Pupil or pupa?
Either. Pupil is the adjective, pupa is the noun. And basically, back in the day, which people like you would consider sane, we were basically larvae, caterpillars. Going along, eating up our history and our religion and our culture and all that kind of thing. But we grew older, we matured, we became more ourselves. So we didn't need our history, our religion, our culture anymore, and built these protections against all of those things we no longer needed. And now are in the midst of transforming into something new and different. We're doing this as a society, as a planet, as a people. And at some point, as yet to be determined, the pupa, notice that is the noun, will crack open, and out will emerge this glorious, splendid moth or butterfly or drag queen or something. And out it will come. And there we shall be fully self-realized as individuals, as a culture, as a country, as a planet.
I don't know if I've ever heard the metaphor of caterpillar to a butterfly used for revolution before, but there you go.
Well, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. You can't make a
I have a new one.
butterfly.
I have a new one
Oh.
that actually got tossed at me.
What's that?
Sometimes you have to drink the poison to find the antidote.
Yeah. Okay. How about that, Ergo? Well, I would prefer to think in my terms than to face the truth.
Don't we all?
Yeah. So isn't it better? Don't you feel better to think that we're going to some great emergence rather than to think we're going down the tubes because A, we're run by scum, and B, we're not the men our fathers were?
Yeah. I would say yes on both counts.
Well, which would you prefer?
The latter.
We're going downhill and being ruled by scum and not being the men our fathers were?
Well, I feel like
You
all those
prefer
things.
that?
I don't prefer it. That's reality. I'm saying what's happening.
Excuse me. Remember what I said about hate fact?
What did you say?
I said a hate fact is something that's true, but it shouldn't be. Or as Albert used to say, I don't like that, so it's a lie.
Well, so
see, the problem is,
what happens when a fact checker encounters a hate fact? Because are they verifying it? Like that's a hate fact? Like what you say is true?
No, he eliminates it. He removes it.
I feel like a hate fact is like an undeniable fact, though. I feel like that's
well, it's undeniable only in the sense of objective reality.
I see. Okay, we demand the right to use our imagination to discover new solutions.
Precisely. See, you could probably get a job in the new dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. Cardinal Fernandez is looking for people like you. Mentally flexible. Mentally and morally flexible people who were not bound by the chains that other generations have trapped people with. All right, let me ask you a question. Would you say that generally speaking, there's only one definition per thing?
Yes.
Oh, really? Really? So you're saying that this cup could not be a 13-year-old chimpanzee named Daisy?
A 13-year-old chimpanzee. Yes.
That's what you're saying?
Yes.
You are saying that this cup cannot be a 13-year-old chimpanzee named Daisy?
Charles, that's a physical impossibility.
Says you. Now, what if the person making the pronouncement was not me, but somebody in charge, like a pope or a president?
Well,
Exactly. Then there's only two words you can respond with.
yes,
Yeah,
sir.
boss.
Yeah. Okay.
That's all you got to say. Yeah, boss. See, I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to help you fit into a world that reflects a different system of values from that with which your grandparents and great grandparents are familiar. I'm not saying they were wrong. I'm saying that we've gotten past all that. We've come to a new place of understanding.
I don't like this place. It's pretty scary. There's a lot of
Oh,
weird people in this place.
no, they only seem weird. Think of the Borg. Once you give up resisting, they seem fine.
Well, that's true, actually.
See? You have nothing to lose but your sanity. And what good has that ever done you? Exactly. And you said I was emotionally unavailable. I'm here to help. I am like a highway from our master's views to yours, like the mouth of Sauron, in a sense.
Mouth of Sauron?
Well, in the sense of being an interpreter, a facilitator, a helper, an influencer, a community activist.
Well, I mean, he might be all those things, but I don't know if the Mouth of Sauron was emotionally available.
Oh, he was emotionally available, all right. And so was Sauron. So were the Nazgul. Mordor was nothing if not emotionally available.
What?
Mordor's emotions were available to all who needed. How do you think Saruman got in on the deal? The Palantir welcomed him emotionally to the Barad-dûr.
I think you're playing with words here. Emotionally, that doesn't even make any sense.
What are you talking about? Of course it makes sense. I mean, you accused me of being emotionally unavailable. Okay, fine. That
Yeah,
implies
I think you're confusing lust for power with being emotionally available somehow. I don't know. There's some sort of mix-up here.
no, not at all. You've got this overweening lust for total control over everything. I think that that's a real emotion. I think it's a true feeling. I think it's an authentic expression of where Sauron was and, and how he felt about his place in the cosmos. And I think that Sauron and his minions, all of them, would try to express in their own way how they felt.
Well, there definitely was a lot of self-expression. I'll give you
Well, indeed,
that.
there was. I mean, the one ring to rule them all. If that isn't self-expression, I don't know what is. Well,
I'm just. It's a complicated thing. I feel like there's a lot of tough love in there. You know, there's a lot of tough love from Sauron.
tough love or tough hate.
Well, you're the one who's talking about him being emotionally available.
Yes, but see, you can be emotionally. I mean, if somebody pistol whips you with a pistol, 'cause I guess that's what you have to pistol whip someone with. Obviously, he's available emotionally.
Is he though?
Now, well, yeah. I mean, he's not refraining from expressing himself, is he? He's not holding back.
I feel like you're mixing up your definitions. I feel like you've got different definitions here. Emotionally
Well,
available?
yes, Sauron was emotionally available to all of Middle Earth.
I just being the ability to make and hold emotional connections with others in relationships.
See?
An emotional connection?
Yes. Didn't he chase the elves from gosh, the middle of the Second Age, all the way down to when he snuffed it?
I don't know if being pistol whipped is being on the receiving end of an emotional connection.
Oh, it's an emotional connection. All right, let me tell you, and a physical one. Not what I'd want to be part of, but still, you know.
I mean, I guess it's fitting this definition. It's a pretty broad definition. Something seems off, though. I can't quite put my finger on it.
Oh, well, if you're going to say that, if you're going to separate emotions into positive and negative, I mean, if you're going to say that you're liking or loving a person, place, or thing is somehow contextually different from hating or loathing a person, place, or thing, well, then yes, there might be some flaw somewhere deep in my argumentation. But if you'll accept that emotions are emotions, qua emotions, and not to introduce simplistic distinctions, well, then it's a different story.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Sauron, I'm looking at the telltale signs of someone who is emotionally unavailable.
And Sauron doesn't fit any of them, does he?
You feel a distance between you and your partner. You feel alone in your relationship. They don't support you. They lack communication skills.
Oh, that wasn't him.
They struggle to display emotions.
He didn't struggle. No, it came from no, not at all.
They struggle to empathize with people close to them. Ooh, that's...
No, he was close to the mouth of Sauron.
They have difficulty connecting with others.
No, I don't think so.
They have a fear. They have a fear of intimacy.
Oh no, not at all. He wanted to absorb everyone into himself.
They make no effort to further the relationship.
That certainly isn't true. Sauron was all about furthering his relationships.
And they lack enthusiasm.
Oh, see, Sauron was not emotionally distant or emotionally unavailable.
All right, fair enough.
I think, see, there's a side of Sauron that we tend not to appreciate today.
I guess so. I guess that's one way to say it.
Yeah, he was open. I mean, look, they call him the lidless eye because he never slept. He was always there for people, 24 hours a day. When they needed him, he was there for them.
I can't argue with that. I don't know.
And when he needed them, he was there for them.
Okay, I don't know how to... I don't know. I feel like I've trapped myself, and I don't know how to get out of this segment other than to
Would you like me to help you out?
Yeah, help me out here.
So you want me to throw you a couple of lines and drag you out of the steaming water?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Not a problem. I don't mind doing that. Because see, I'm not emotionally unavailable.
Okay, thank you, Charles.
You know, your appeal did not fall on deaf ears.
Oh, good.
See, I mean, I've known you since you were a boy, and I am not going to let you flounder around in the sea of insanity by yourself. I am basically throwing you a life preserver that'll pull you out of it and put you back in the seat where you belong, directing one of the most influential shows in traddom.
Beautiful.
I thought you might like it. All right. First thing, and I hope you'll appreciate this. This day, when we're actually doing this show in real time, September 16th, 2023, is in fact the death day of the servant of God, James II of England and Ireland and his American colonies, and the 7th of Scotland. Servant of God, a man to be prayed to, a man whose intercession may be sought.
All right.
And that's, so you see I'm wearing the white rose?
Oh, yeah.
You see I got my Royal Stewart Society tie on?
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's the first thing. Are we feeling a little closer to the shore now?
Sure. Yeah, we're starting to get it revved up. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. It gets better because you're about to feel the ground under your feet in the water now, which is really, you'll feel much better then. Because right now you're out you're in the deep end, where the big boys go in the pool. But we're going to pull you in a little bit, and this I think you'll appreciate. Better yet, we have some feasts coming up in the remainder of September. One of which has a double meaning for you in particular.
Okay, go on.
All right. So we're coming to mid-September this week. And next weekend, sadly, I'll be in Denmark. So I might as well make the announcement for the following week, which is September the 29th, is the feast of St. Michael the Archangel, Michaelmas, a great day for having goose. And if that weren't enough, because Michaelmas is one of my favorite feast days, but there's more. You ready?
Ready.
This year, it's also the Autumn Moon Festival. So not only will you be able to go to Mass in honor of St. Michael the Archangel, but that night you can go to the Huntington Library, their Chinese garden, or to the Arboretum. I think maybe even the park in Arcadia. There'll be several different autumn moon celebrations around the San Gabriel Valley and and toward Arcadia in particular. You'll be able to eat moon cakes. You'll be able to gaze up at a big autumn moon. How does that strike you?
It sounds wonderful.
Do you feel the ground under your feet?
Yes.
Do you feel you're coming back to shore now?
I don't know if I was ever with you on this metaphor, like I'm out to sea.
Well, all right. Well, you said you were floating around out there. That's why I took it from you. I didn't come up with it on my own.
Okay.
So I told you I'd pull you in, didn't I?
You're pulling us into shore. Okay, great.
Yeah. Now you feel secure.
Yeah.
You still seem tentative. I don't think you're quite out of the water.
I feel like you've got this plan that I'm just not seeing. I mean, that's denoted by the smile on your face and this obligatory what? Yeah, it's a typical face right here. I just haven't caught your game yet. I feel like you're. Yeah.
Did it occur to you could be hurting me?
No, that's impossible. That so. Go on.
Well, I'm just saying. Now that means other things are coming up. The first Sunday in October. The first Monday in October. And I suspect we'll have done the show by then. The next one, I guess, will be in 2 weeks' time. So we'll be able to make a bigger deal about this. But don't forget that although the real day is the 11th of October, in the States, the legal holiday is Columbus Day on the first Monday in October. So it's time for all of you Italians and Hispanics to get out there and celebrate Columbus Day and to shout down the morons. But wait, there's more. It's also Canadian Thanksgiving. And I am kind of sick of it because for the past 3 years, every time I've talked about Columbus Day, inevitably I forget to mention Canadian Thanksgiving and then I hear about it. Well, guess what, Canadians? Despite Trudeau and despite the Peel, Ontario School Board getting rid of all books published before 2008 in the public high school library in Peel, Ontario, despite that, I love Canada. And you realize that this is Canada's first Canadian Thanksgiving? No, it's not right. It's second Canadian Thanksgiving with a new king.
Okay.
Are you celebrating Canadian Thanksgiving this year?
No, I'm not Canadian.
How about Columbus Day?
Yeah, absolutely.
You got to celebrate the Autumn Moon Festival.
Probably not.
You got all sorts of opportunities to do so in Arcadia.
That's true, but I don't know. I'm a busy man, Charles.
I'll bet if you brought mooncakes to work, your coworkers would be happy with you.
Maybe. I don't know. Cake. It's hard to go wrong with mooncakes.
That's true, and you can get them if you remember where the big Chinese supermarket is near my house.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure they will be selling mooncakes.
Awesome.
So, and lastly but not least, will you be celebrating Michaelmas?
I'll try to remember. I don't typically, but I'll try to remember. I've never had a goose, and I don't know where to get a goose. And
Well, I can
cooking a
tell you
goose.
that. I can tell you that. You can get a goose at any specialty gourmet market.
Ooh.
Call them in advance and ask them.
Okay. All right.
I used to get them at Vaughn's Pavilions, actually.
All right. No memes of production this week. Next is Book of the Week.
Book of the week. Gosh, it's in my corner. Well, I've decided I'm going to vary book of the week between fiction and nonfiction. So 1 week it'll be nonfiction, 1 week it'll be fiction. Last week we had the Counter-Revolution, which was, you guessed it, nonfiction. So this week we're going to do fiction. And you're probably wondering which book of fiction we're going to do. Well, I've thought long and hard about it, and I've decided that tonight we will do for book of the week nothing less but nothing more than the boy, my mind is slipping. I can't think of the title. That's not good. Senility is not fun. Trust me. I remember. Are we ready? Can we dig it?
We're ready, Charles.
Ray Bradbury, The Martian Chronicles.
All
Now,
right.
you're probably wondering, this is like the third Bradbury book I've done?
No. I mean, well, since we started this, I don't think you've done a Bradbury book.
I did Dandelion Wine.
Oh, okay. There we go. Yeah. So this is the second one.
All right. So The Martian Chronicles is actually a collection of short stories about the same theme because it didn't begin as a book. But the theme is the arrival of the men of Earth on the planet Mars. Now, they arrive, there are already Martians there who are living their lives. They're telepathic, so that provides some issues. In the end, though, the Martians, although they show themselves quite capable of defending themselves against the invaders, they're wiped out by a human disease, which is chickenpox. It kills most of them, but not all of them. Some of them survive. And beyond that, there's the interplay of man with man, both affected by the environment he's settled, but also just by his own nature. The Martian Chronicles. Very thoughtful book, very much despite being science fiction, very much a romantic's view of the angry red planet, and a very good book. So that's it for this week. The Martian Chronicles.
Seems like it almost. Some of the things you said, it almost makes me think of the Wild West, just on another planet.
Well, it's got elements of that. And also, don't forget, a lot of the writings about the Wild West were themselves somewhat romantic and with the transformation, as it were, the placing of European themes from the European wilds into the Wild West. Yeah, because remember, all of our fairy tales and things like that take place in the Black Forest or the Ardennes or whatever. Um, so often the plots would be by earlier writers would simply be transported from the wilds of Europe to the American frontier, to the Old West, and then again, somebody like Bradbury transfers some of the same themes to Mars. But actually, they're all the same in a way because they're the dealing of man with the unknown. Would you believe there was a whole genre of Australian ghost stories in the 19th century, which were very much affected by the strange environment that the first Anglo-Australians found themselves in, because Australia was a very peculiar place, very much more alien than North America was to the European. Uh, the animals, the plants, and when you go out into the nights, look out in the night sky, the stars are different, and you really don't realize how unsettling that is until you're seeing it.
The stars are different?
Yes, because remember they're in the southern hemisphere, so Orion is upside down, and you see the big constellation they call the Southern Cross, which is on the flags of both Australia and New Zealand. It's a big thing. It's as arresting to look at as Orion or the Big Dipper. And you look up at the sky, and they're just not the stars you've looked at your whole life and taken for granted. It's a very odd feeling.
Interesting.
Now, obviously, if you're born and bred down there, you get the same feeling if you come up here. But for those first settlers, what a strange environment they were in.
Okay. All right. Time for the questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can do this.
All right.
I can do it. I'm good enough. I'm strong enough. And doggone it, people like me. Well, okay. Tolerate me. Somewhat. A little. Sometimes. If I've been really good.
Okay.
Maybe.
Anita says, "Greetings, gentlemen. In the waning days of summer, which is technically still with us until September 23rd, even if seersucker season has now ended, I would like to first solicit prayers for my late father's second wife, who I just heard is dying of cancer. Please pray particularly for her conversion, as she is hostile to the Catholic Church."
Well, let's do that. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Santa Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. In nomine Patris, et Filius, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.
Right. Anita goes on to say, next, to help us all stay sane inside insanity, I'm hoping to get Charles to dive into some lighter fare. We all know and love Charles's all-purpose Eastern European vampire movie accent. But what about the quasi-British, so-called mid-Atlantic accent employed by many movie stars during the golden age of Hollywood? Where did it come from? Does it have anything to do with the stage background of many actors of that time? Could bringing back the mid-Atlantic accent help to heighten our popular culture? Thank you and God bless.
Well, I should say it would. I think that bringing back the mid-Atlantic accent would be a way of reestablishing a connection between the two sides of the Atlantic, and not simply the two sides of the Atlantic, but Australia and New Zealand as well. I believe that by reforging these links culturally and via the media of television, wireless, and even the internet, I believe that a strong force for inter-Anglo unity can be rebuilt.
I'm just not placing that accent. What celebrities have this? It almost seemed like you wanted to drift into Jimmy Stewart, but that can't be.
No,
Um,
actually, a good epitome of it would be Franklin Roosevelt. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
that's very distinctive, though. I can't picture anyone else in Hollywood having that. Who else has that? That's really
Well, actually, I guess you would say William Powell would be a better example.
William Powell.
Yes, think of William Powell. Think of the way he spoke.
Okay, okay.
Do you have William Powell's words in your
So
ears?
that's like, so what's a golden age of Hollywood? So then I'm thinking it's like the 30s and
Yeah,
40s. Yeah, 30s.
20s, 30s, 40s, up to World War II.
Okay, okay.
And that was the end of the golden age of Hollywood.
Wow.
At Mid-Atlantic, we'll see there's several different things that have to be fed in, as it were. You see, one is the seed pronunciation in Britain, Oxbridge, as some call it. And that was the background of a great deal of the Shakespearean acting of the time. And it was believed that if one wished to be a Shakespearean actor, that is how one spoke.
What about Sidney Greenstreet? Because
Well,
he had a very pleasant way to talk, and it's sort of this formal thing. Or is that
yes, he certainly did, Mr. Franchini. You are quite a remarkable young gentleman, Mr. Franchini. I'll
So-
tell you straight out, sir. I like to speak to people I like to talk to people who like to talk.
I love your
Yes, quite a
Sidney
character.
Greenstreet. I love that. So he
Quite a character.
qualifies.
He'd qualify. But again, I mean, it was basically a mixture of three elements. One was the British upper class. Two was the American upper class of the Northeast, anyway, touched of the South. And then third was the theatrical component. I mean, my father's English was, it was a second language, but he spoke it like a native. But he was a radio man. And I mean, he had been from his high school days, even before. He and his mother had a radio show in New Bedford, Mass. But it was half in French, half in English. And their English was very much mid-Atlantic because that was the way radio people up until World War II was supposed to speak. After World War II, both on radio and television, which was, of course, really beginning its nascence, the shift went from mid-Atlantic to basically Midwestern, which is why what they go for now, people who sound like they could be from Nebraska. They don't sound like anything in particular. But before the war, both in radio, in movies, etc., Mid-Atlantic, which is a broad scope of accents, really. But in all of them, you can hear a touch of British, a touch of New England, a touch of upstate New York, with the exact degrees varying according to the individual, really. And usually a touch of the South as well, just a touch.
All right. A question from Warren who says, "Hello, Vincent and Charles. A friend and I were talking about how the current UK titles, such as Duke of York and the Princess Royal, would be applied to the current Jacobite claimant's family. Is there an official rule set that would make it easy to put people to titles? And if so, where could one find such a rule set? Bonus question: how many titles can Charles connect off the cuff?"
Actually, the bonus question is easier because it's not rigid. I mean, there are certain things. The son of the heir becomes the Duke of Cornwall at birth. It has to be named Prince of Wales, and may or may not receive an investiture as a result. The royal duchies last until the end. In other words, in the current setup, the Duke of York He has no sons. But if he had a son, he would be Duke of York after him. He has no sons, so when he dies, the title will be reunited with the crown and can be given to somebody else. That's why there's a Duke of Kent, who is actually the grandson of the Duke of Kent who got the title first, if that makes sense. And then his son will be Duke of Kent. But if at some point there are no more male heirs to the Duchy of Kent, it goes back to the crown and it'll be given to somebody else. So that's why, for instance, the Duchy of Edinburgh, the Duke of Edinburgh, was created for Prince Philip, but the king has given it to his brother, who was the Earl of Wessex and is now Duke of Edinburgh. So there is no rigid way of looking at it. Now, if you're to do the Jacobite thing, I suppose, and this is a guess, I could well be wrong, but Franz, Duke and Bayern, and the heir to the Bavarian throne, as well as the English, Scots, and Irish thrones, he would have been Prince of Wales when he was the heir. His younger brother, who has daughters, would, I suppose, very, very possibly have been Duke of York, because that's the next senior title, if it has not become extinct and gone back to the crown. If it hasn't, then it just keeps on running, and they would use the next vacant royal duchy down the line. But I would suppose that France's next brother would be Duke of York, and here's where it gets interesting. France is not married, despite appearances, and he has no male or female heirs. Of his body, he has no issue. But his younger brother has no sons; he has daughters. So the eldest daughter of the quote-unquote Duke of York, if I'm correct, might very well be named Princess Royal. But that's a title that can go to any senior princess of the royal house at the discretion of the monarch. So if she were named the Princess Royal, it would make sense, though, because she in turn married the heir to the throne of Liechtenstein. So she's now the Princess of Liechtenstein. And her son will one day be Prince of Liechtenstein and heir to the Jacobite claims. Now, interestingly, the claim to the Kingdom of Bavaria is going to a cousin of theirs, because that follows the Salic law. You can't have a reigning queen of Bavaria, despite the best efforts. So that's what we've got.
Right. Michael has a question set, and he says, as a Roman Catholic of Persian descent, I have at many times thought about Cyrus the Great from the Old Testament and the ending of the Babylonian captivity. How does the Catholic Church view him? Because I cannot find much other than historical details. I have often heard that he is a messianic figure, which would indicate something greater, especially being a Gentile. Any help would be appreciated.
Well, he's a messianic figure in the sense of prefiguring Christ by saving the Jews from Babylonian captivity, that being likened to the captivity of sin we all undergo. He doesn't do so, of course, by being killed. He does so by virtue of conquering. But Christians saw Christ's death on the cross and the harrowing of hell as a conquest. You see. So there's that kind of thing. Now, Cyrus was also a Zoroastrian. He wasn't a Christian or a Jew of any kind. So you don't hear that much about him, except in those very vague symbolic terms.
Okay. So he's nothing like Melchizedek or something like that.
No.
Okay. John says, what are your thoughts on the Lost Generation?
They were really out of it because they were lost. Well, I mean, the Lost Generation, we're talking about the Fitzgeralds, we're talking about Hemingway, Faulkner, I guess, to a degree. They were an interesting bunch of people, the writers of the 20s, disenchanted by the war and so on. And of course, they produced some great works. They produced some not so great works. Their moral standards were rather low, and they contributed to a general weakening of them. But they wrote some really, really fine things. It's important to remember, though, we tend to lump everybody who went through their experiences as part of the lost generation. But the truth is, the majority of people in America, of Americans, who went through World War One, went back home and picked up the reins where they had dropped them. When I was a kid, World War One vets were everywhere. The druggist, the milkman, the this, the that. They're all World War One vets. They were still very much a part of society. And most of them renegotiated their way back into civilian life without being too quote unquote lost. But World War One was much harder on Europeans than it was on Americans because you had so many British, so many French, so many Germans, so many Austrians killed, so many Russians, so many Australians and New Zealanders, so many Canadians who died. So the Great War left a much bigger mark on almost all the other combatants other than the Americans. So and they all produced, as it were, lost generations of their own in terms of literature and so on, and a great deal of what happened in Central Europe, fascism and all the rest of it, was a result of that war.
So that's really interesting. So you almost seem to say that the lost generation is not really representative of their generation.
Not really. Not really. I mean, they were in a sense, and they certainly had a great effect on styles and so forth. But they were not typical of their generation, not typical at all. Better in some ways than most, worse in some ways than most, but not really typical. If they were, everybody would have written a bestseller.
I see. So okay, that's interesting. All right. What were the hippies like as parents?
Awful, awful. Almost as bad as they were as children. Ha 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 ha. They were really. Well, see, the problem was this: hippiedom was all about self-discovery, about me, about being real, being authentic, and so on and so forth. But the problem with that kind of quest for self-knowledge is that you become emotionally unavailable to those who are dependent on you. So you had their kids, rather than looking at their children as the most important things in their lives, around whom they needed to center everything they did. They basically treated them as, add-ons along for the ride and so forth. And being enemies of authority, etc., they didn't want to act as parents. They wanted to be their children's friends and things like this, which is the last thing a kid needs. A kid needs structure. And he needs a structure that is as unhypocritical as possible. And that's very important for a kid. And they just were not capable of it, given, I mean, if I'm all about me, I can't really give you a lot of thought, now can I?
I thought it's like they're all about freedom and discovering oneself. And so then when you have a kid, you let the kid discover himself or herself. But that basically means you're just somewhere else.
Yeah, and of course, upon what basis are they going to make those discoveries? You know, if you've been taught a great deal of literature, right, and you've gone through very exhausting classes, and you've learned Shakespeare and Chaucer and Tolstoy and all this stuff, and then they say, all right, choose. What are your favorites? Well, you're in a position to choose. You've got a combination of knowledge and whatever your own taste is. Now imagine that you hadn't had any education in literature, whatever, not in the slightest, and I say, all right, now choose. You have no basis on which to choose. You don't know nothing from nothing.
Yeah, it's interesting because they're all about self-discovery and freedom, but I feel like that's when they're young. So it's easy to be like that when you're young. It's funny how then when you get old, then suddenly you flip the switch and then everything's about
Dominance and submission.
equity officers.
Equity officers, yeah.
Uh,
Well, see, and the worst of it is, you produce a generation or two that don't know anything, and then you get upset because they don't know anything. How are they going to do that? How are they going to know what you know? Well, they shoulda. Yeah, okay. You know, do you remember what was it called? Little Boy Blue? There was a song, Cats in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon, Little Boy Blue and the Man on the Moon. Let me see. It makes me think of it. Give me just a second. It came out in the 70s, but it makes me think of the parents. Now, mind you, this was actually supposed to be an attack, I think, on 50s parents, but that's in the cradle. It came out in what year? 70? It won't tell me. 74. Yeah. So it's 50 years old. But The Cat's in the Cradle, it's called. And it shows what not to do as a parent, I think. I think the lyrics are my child arrived just the other day. He came to the world in the usual way. But there were planes to catch and bills to pay. He learned to walk while I was away. And he was talking before he knew it. And as he grew, he said, I'm going to be like you, Dad. You know, I'm going to be like you. And then the chorus, and the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man in the moon. When you coming home, Dad? I don't know when, but we'll get together then. You know, we'll have a good time then. My son turned 10 just the other day. He said, thanks for the ball, Dad. Come on, let's play. Can you teach me to throw? I said, not today. I've got a lot to do. He said, that's okay. And he walked away, but his smile never dimmed. It said, I'm going to be like him. Yeah, you know, I'm going to be like him. And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man in the moon. When you're coming home, Dad, I don't know when, but we'll get together then. You know, we'll have a good time then. Well, he came from college just the other day. So much like a man, I just had to say, son, I'm proud of you. Can you sit for a while? He shook his head and then said with a smile, what I'd really like, Dad, is to borrow the car keys. See you later. Can I have them, please? And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man in the moon. When you coming home, son? I don't know when, but we'll get together then, Dad. You know, we'll have a good time then. I've long since retired. My son's moved away. I called him up just the other day. I said, I'd like to see you if you don't mind. He said, I'd love to, Dad, if I could find the time. You see, my new job's a hassle and the kids have the flu. But it's sure nice talking to you, Dad. It's been sure nice talking to you. And as I hung up the phone, it occurred to me he'd grown up just like me. My boy was just like me. And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man in the moon. When you're coming home, son, I don't know when, but we'll get together then, Dad. We're going to have a good time then.
That's a sad one.
You think? Ladies and gentlemen, make sure the young people in your life are the most important thing you've got going. Make sure they know that. Because if they don't, all sorts of bad things can happen. And at the very least, when you're my age, you'll be alone. And I'm grateful to God that hasn't happened to me. So remember that, ladies and gentlemen. The hippies thought of themselves first. And that meant there was, I mean, we don't have adults today. You know, I was reading online when I should have been writing the book. Sorry. I was reading a blog. It was actually written between 2011 and 2013 by an Italian-American lady from Chicago who came out to California in the 60s. An account of her life. And a lot of she lived in the 60s, 70s, 80s. She's still alive. She's in her 80s today, which makes it all really, really sad. I mean, a tale of in between places and restaurants and music venues and things that I knew myself growing up later, because she's older than me, of course, by 20 years. She was married the first time, the year I was born. And her life, my God, what an empty procession of hookups and breakups. And it's just very, very sad to read. And now she's in her 80s. One daughter who, I don't know what their relationship is like. And again, I have no idea what they're like now because the blog came to an end in 2013. But don't do that, you know? Don't do that. You don't want to look back at your life. I mean, there are several ways you can win in life, several ways you can lose. If you feel that you've dedicated your life to something worthwhile, when you get older, yeah, okay, you may have lost things, you may have gained them, but you got a certain sort of satisfaction over what you've done. If there are children in your life, whether your own or, you know, nieces, nephews, adoptees, godchildren, whatever you like, they're the same, different but similar. You can win either way with those, but best is both, frankly, to feel that you've lived your life in pursuit of something good. And, by the way, you have all these children who are, well, no longer children, but still dear to you. And then, of course, you can lose doubly. No children or few who feel that way about you. And looking back with a whole bunch of empty episodes that make up your life.
Watch out for Wendy Fields there.
Well, she was one of those. Why do you think she's endlessly roaming the fields now? Poor Wendy is looking for the meaning she couldn't find as a 60s countercultural person. And that's why when she roams the fields, you hear the wind blowing. It's blowing not just around her, but through her, from one ear to the other, through the emptiness. From one ear to the other, it blows through Wendy's head.
It's sad.
But at least she's got an open mind.
Every day is a struggle.
Yep. Poor Wendy. Every day is a struggle. But you gotta give her credit. She still keeps on keeping on.
All right, our final question today. Has there ever been a crisis of faith similar to the one we see today?
Well, yes and no, no and yes. I say the no part is because no period is ever identically the same in history. So, but there certainly have been similar things. I would say the closest to what we've got now is probably the Arian heresy. Back in the early days of the church, when, as St. Jerome put it, the world awoke and groaned to find itself Arian, because they were everywhere. Um, During the pornocracy, it would have felt this bad if you were living in Rome. But, and that's the thing about a lot of the church's problems. Unless you were directly affected, you weren't affected. So that's what makes this thing different. Uh, it used to be the vast majority of people, if they knew anything about what the Pope was up to, it was because they read a papal encyclical or something. Now, you can't escape the Holy Father. You can't escape the church hierarchy. You can't escape anything. We know everything all at once. Which is also why sometimes the authority figures can be misread, because they make an off the cuff statement and people take it as their opinion. I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, if I myself were held to every off the cuff statement I've ever made, I'd go to jail. Well, because it's true, you say things as a joke, you say them whatever, and sometimes they're not always the best or most appropriate things you could do. And even without an equity officer sitting on your shoulder, or a sensitivity reader willing to smack you around, sometimes, well, of course, not anymore, but once upon a time, and I'm young enough or old enough to remember this, it was actually said that some things were in poor taste.
That's true.
But see, we didn't have equity officers or sensitivity readers back then. We had people called mothers and grandmothers. They were the arbiters of what was in good taste and what wasn't. And woe befall the kid of all ages, when you include grandmothers, that made a comment in poor taste in the hearing of one of his female elders. Whop! That was in very poor taste. I'm sorry, Nana, I won't say it again. I should think not.
What? So, in terms of the crisis of faith, how are we doing with the clergy? You think in general, not just the hierarchy, but the clergy? Because I hear a lot of interesting things. Like, for example, obviously you've got the case of Saint John of the Cross, right? Where, as I understand it, I believe from your history lessons and just reading elsewhere, so the Black Plague ravaged everybody. And so what happened after that is they're pretty desperate to and pretty loose in the convents, monasteries, all that. And so you had this tremendous laxity that
Yeah.
was prevalent everywhere, and that was showcased in things like them locking Saint John of the Cross up in jail for his orthodoxy.
Well, he rebuked their consciences, and people generally don't like that. But I would say, as far as the clergy in general go, I have a lot of optimism with the younger clergy. I mean, you got to remember that the deviants, the doctrinal deviants, I mean to say, running the show at the moment, um, for the most part, they're elderly, And if they aren't elderly, they're sure opportunists. So sooner or later, the old timers will go to Bishop Heaven, as described by St. John Chrysostom, and things will change.
Right. Why? It's just the metaphor of the Jesus's cursed fig tree. To be honest, right? A tree that doesn't have fruit will he cursed it.
Yeah,
So
and the thing you notice about these people is that they don't produce anything. They take what was already there and they wreck, but there's nothing they can make because apart from being the devil's daughters, they're not creative. They're only about death and destruction. Um, I mean, have you ever seen termites build anything other than mounds in Africa? No.
no, nothing other than mounds. No.
You ever seen a termite build a house?
Build a house? That would be something. No, I haven't seen them do that.
How about a wooden chair?
A wooden chair? No. Nope.
See, they can eat them through to the point to where if you sit on that chair, it'll collapse in dust and you'll be on the floor. Looks good until you sit on it. But in terms of making something useful, it's kind of beyond them.
Spiders can build webs?
They can. Cardinal McCarrick used to.
That's very true. That's very true. Okay, touche.
He used to shoot out his little spinnerets, and catch whatever he could in his webs. My, oh my, said the spotter to the fly.
That's in poor taste. Yeah, you're not used to that, huh? You're not used to that anymore.
I'm not. Personally, I don't see how invoking one of the most influential clerics of my time could ever be in poor taste. A man who the current Holy Father drew to himself. A man who was partly responsible for the Holy See's current China policy. Now, don't you feel bad? Look what you've done. You have called the entire apparatus of the Holy See into question by your unwarranted attack upon a man who's suffered enough.
What? I said your joke was in poor taste, and that threatens the entire apparatus of the Holy See?
It does, because it implies there's something wrong with mentioning Cardinal McCarrick, Uncle Ted, who is responsible for the appointment of so many current grinder users in the Holy See.
I feel like you're doing some sort of misapplication of the methods of the sensitivity readers and the equity officers. I feel like you're applying their methodology in a different sphere of living.
I might have missed out on one of the chapters in the manual.
But let's just talk about because we're talking about how things bad are. You had shared something on Twitter which was breathtaking in a bad way, which was the I guess it was a library for a school,
high school library in Peel, Ontario, which is near Mississauga, Ontario, for all of you Canadian geography fans. And basically, the province of Ontario has issued a fiat, an ukase from the top, that libraries have to weed out books dependent on criteria which involve equity, diversity, belonging, critical race theory, and all the other paraphernalia of the modern moron. So the modern moron in charge, Mick, if you like. Moron in charge, Mick. Modern moron in charge, Mick. Woohoo. But such creatures gave the order that books that were deficient in this area were to be taken out. And the public high school in Peel took that to mean every book published before 2008.
Right. So the picture you shared, it's these library shelves that are
Empty.
probably pretty much empty, right? They're like at 15% capacity, or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they are. They are. And of course, this has led a number of parents who jumped up and down about it, as you can imagine. There's been all sorts of, jumping up and down. And this, I sent you it's probably copywritten, so I can't do anything with it, but I sent you an article about an equity officer uh, in a school, a school board in North Carolina. And one of the things about the article, they had a single sentence that really, really got me more than anything. Many districts, school districts, were trapped between the push toward equity and fierce opposition from local parent groups. Okay, I got to lay down a principle here. And it's true in Canada as it is in the United States. Both regimes pretend that they are popular regimes resting upon the consent of the governed, whom they tax unmercifully for their support. This taxation is nowhere deeper or truer than when it comes to education. Now, here's a basic problem, a basic justice. In Catholic teaching, the parent is the God-given chief instructor of his child. The teacher and the apparatus of the education industry that go along with the teacher are simply deputies paid for by the parent to do things in terms of education that the parent has perhaps not the ability nor the time for. But bear in mind, it's the parent who is the chief educator and the parent who pays the bill. Now, where does this leave us? Popular government, according to the theory that it constantly excretes out of its mouths, claims that it is the voice of the people. Well, if that's true, when you hear a politico in a so-called democratic country yap about changing people's attitudes, changing people's views, changing anything regarding the people, he has no right to do that. He has no right to change anything because he is not a king by grace of God who has a higher viewpoint from which he claims to rule. The politico in a setup like ours pretends that he is the servant of the people. Well, if he is the servant of the people, then he has utterly no right whatsoever to change their views, their behavior, their opinions, or anything else. He has only two words to say to them, and that is, yes, boss, because he is paid. He is a paid servant of the people. This is doubly true, triply true, quadruply true when it comes to school boards and school districts. This thing caught between the two. No. Such a person has no right to listen to anyone but the parents because they're paying him to do a job. What if I were to say to you, Mr. Franchini, I know you paid me to try to explain Catholic beliefs and so forth, but I would like to write and speak about the romance novels that I'm writing.
Then goodbye. You're
No,
gone.
no, no. See, I'm caught. I'm caught between my job description and my desire to write romance novels and to inflict them on everyone. I'm caught between these two. Don't you feel any sympathy for me? See how terrible it is? Poor me. I'm caught between these two things.
No.
I'm caught between the job you hired me to do and my own aspirations.
Well, this is the arrogant thing. I mean, this is where the educators know better than the parents.
As I know better than you do. You should be pushing my romance novels.
Right.
Right. Now, the first one I think you'll really, really like. It's called Love's Torn Bodice. And it's about a woman who, what? What? You know,
Sounds like
they
a.
call they call romance novels bodice rippers. So I figure we zero in, we really cash in with this one.
All right. Great.
There's just no question about what it's about, you see.
Yeah.
So why should my lack of taste get me thrown out of my ear? Knew you couldn't answer that one. Having said that, it's the same here. You're right. I have no right to do anything other than what I'm paid to do. The only alternative is if I saw, uh, let's say that I saw that to continue to publish Catholic stuff was going to destroy your profit base eventually. I would have a right to bring that to your attention. Now, having said that, if profit isn't your ultimate motive, isn't your top motive, and even if it is, that's your choice to make, not mine. I may tell you about it, but I don't have the right to suddenly change things in the company. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, too, governments and school boards may want to advise their masters of changes in society as they see them, but it's up to the people who pay their bills and keep their little moronic mouths moving. It's up to them to decide. No one else. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you find yourself in a position of any kind where someone who is pretending to be not your master but your servant and saying, well, we've got to change your views, we've got to change. No, you don't. You've got to do your job and shut up and actually do something in your job portfolio. That's what you've got to do. Why are you talking about this garbage to my kids when these children can't read? They can't master. You can't teach basic skills, but you're going on about this stuff and you're charging me for it.
Charles, I feel like you haven't talked about the real problem, which is that in order for basically not enough parents care. We just talked about the hippie
Well,
generation where it's like, well, okay, the child just does his own thing. That's still happening. Not enough people care, so they can do what
it
they want.
is.
We've got the bread and circuses. We've got all these distractions. Everyone's doing their own thing. And it's like putting a person. It's like the same function as putting your kids in front of the television and letting the television raise them, except it's at school.
Yep.
The thing is, you have to
And
care and you have to be effort. I feel like so much of life is governed by literally, well, maybe 90% of people taking the path of least resistance, which this is it.
this is very, very true. And the thing is, ladies and gentlemen, they get away with it because they can get away with it. And they get away with it because the majority allow them. And in that sense, it really is a democracy with a small, small d. It's a democracy in the sense that the majority who have allowed themselves to become sheep and go to sleep They're fine with it.
And this is sort of what I'm saying. I kind of wanted to steer this to the question, which is like, how long can this go on? Because so with the library, okay, on one level, it has all these woke books, 2008 and beyond, but it on a more basic level, the library isn't even ceasing to function as a library because it's hardly having any books.
Yeah.
So that's, in my opinion, going to get even more people upset. Like I feel like there's the opportunity for more parents to be upset and to get involved. And I guess my question is it going to be enough eventually to sort of perhaps retrace our steps into and go into a better direction?
Well, you see, one doesn't know. I mean, one of two things will happen. Either that will happen, enough people will see before it's too late how terrible it is and call a halt, or it'll continue until it collapses. And then, of course, when it collapses, people are forced to do things. When you're starving and you're living in a pile of rubble, it's an inducement. I don't know. When the electricity is off and the grid's collapsed, I don't know. Gee, mind you, I do think at this stage of the game, if the internet went under on a semi-permanent basis, I think you'd have a lot of suicides.
Um, I, with this level of mental illness, sure. I'm not gonna
I,
argue on that point.
I don't say it to be amusing. I think a lot of people have become emotionally dependent, uh, and during COVID, especially amongst older people, not just younger people, they become emotionally dependent upon the machine that's always in front of us. And don't get me wrong, this machine has a ton of benefits. I'd be lying if I said it didn't. But people become emotionally dependent on it, not simply as a source of information and communication, but as a source of self-validation. You know, if you feel a deep emotional satisfaction because you got one over on them on Twitter, what have you accomplished? What did you really do? I feel good, man. Well, yeah, but you won't feel that good feeling if the whole thing collapses. Uh, Believe it or not, I saw an old Sliders episode last night. Yes, I'm binge watching Sliders. The last thing I do, ladies and gentlemen, is I'm writing the book. I write and I write and I write and I write until the ideas don't come anymore. And then I stop, usually about anywhere between midnight and 2 a.m. And I'll watch an episode of Sliders and go to bed. Cleanses my head for the morning. Well, I got to tell you, I'm in the fourth season right now, and it's really going downhill, sadly. But the last night, what I saw was a virtual reality world that slid into, where people were in virtual reality all the time, and it was like a drug. And when you took them off it, they were like, ah. I thought it was funny because that came out in 98, 99, something like that. And that is the world to a great degree we've entered in today. I mean, how often do we find ourselves? I know I find myself constantly checking my phone. I'm looking at it when I'm on the public transport instead of reading a book, which I would have done in the old days. Um, I mean, it's a real thing, and I do believe that if the machine stops, a lot of people will simply not be able to deal with it. If you get your major self-validation in life through gardenscapes, and suddenly there is no gardenscapes. What are you going to do?
Well, I really think this is the things we're talking about is what ties into Louis de Montfort's prophecy that the saints of the later times will be so great and exalted, because we don't realize how much is weaponized at us to enslave us in a certain way. Like even something as simple as gardenscapes to try to get you to get the dopamine flowing, right? So many different things to get that dopamine drip, that validation, to develop these behaviors that basically just um, get you, in a room with the box and then four walls around you, and then that's it.
Yeah, certainly you're cheaper to maintain that way. I got to tell you, I told you my adventure with gardenscapes, didn't I?
Yeah, I mean, what you're not going to do the microtransactions because you're cheap.
Yeah. And I'm not doing the microtransactions, and I'm not doing it at all because it takes up time.
Well, see that's again one of the things is with games too, and we're talking to a primarily male audience. I've done the games all the time, so I know all the traps. It's the illusion of progression, right? The illusion of
Well, you're
progression
going
is
to different levels, but
you're going
levels of
different,
what?
right?
And what has it actually got you? You know,
Right.
except to Pandaland if you're playing World of Warcraft.
Mists of Pandaria expansion. Yep. I was gamer enough where I know these things. Yeah, that's right.
The Blood Elves, or
Blood Elves. Yeah, like Taylor Swift. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Taylor Swift. You remember Taylor Swift and the Blood Elves?
Yeah. Okay.
There'd be a name for a band.
Taylor Swift and the Blood Elves. That's a good one.
Yeah, I'd pay to see them live tonight at the Palladium. One night only. Taylor Swift and the Blood Elves.
All right, so we're ranting and raving. Did you have anywhere else you wanted to go? We're kind of doing this.
Poland.
Yeah, Poland's a nice place.
Well, I've been there before. I'd like to go again. Anyway, no, seriously. No, just ladies and gentlemen, while we've got to keep an eye out for all of this drivel and horror, also don't forget this is the time of year when the great feasts begin, starting with Halloween and going all the way to Mardi Gras. I mean, we have this. You got Advent in there too, but we're getting into the celebrative time of year, and celebrate them all. Celebrate all these holidays. Reconnect with your past. You can only really do anything effective in the present, but when the present is painful, you can quiet the pain with a dose of nostalgia.
Wait a minute. The great feast days end at Mardi Gras?
They don't end. I mean, then you have Lent begin.
That's
and so
a bozo no, Charles. You're
I know
skipping
it's a bozo no.
St. Patrick's Day and St. Joseph's Day.
Well,
which
they count,
two
yes.
ethnicities you regularly disparage.
Despite descending from them myself.
I mean, yeah, you're playing that card, but disingenuously.
Hold on a second. Hold on. Let me see. This card has a shamrock on it. Don't you know? This one here, it has a heart. Is a core. Is a heart. Is Italiano. And you look at the two cards, Irish and Italian. And I don't mind playing both of them. Because, of course, I have a third card that's got a fleur-de-lis on it. And I have a fourth card that's got the Doppeladler. And I've got a fifth card that's tartan. And I've got a sixth card that's got the Cross of St. George on it. And I've got what? I'm going to play all my ethnic cards. No? What about this one with the Indian feather on it?
The Indian feather?
Yeah.
What are you claiming Native American status?
No, American Indian.
American Indian?
I would never claim Native American status outside one of the Ivy League schools. Or the Capitol building, of course, where, what's her face? Folksahanis reigns supreme. What's her name?
Warren?
Yes, Folksahanis. That's the one. I'm more Indian than she was.
It's not a competition, Charles.
What, to be more real or to be phonier? All right, we're ranting and raving, but I want you to remember one thing.
What
if
is
it's
that?
Monday,
It's off the menu.
and the soul you save
May be your own.
God bless you, gang. We will see you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks.
Ciao.